This is every master set from the Scarlet and Violet era. From 151 to Prismatic Evolutions, the Scarlet and Violet era has given us some of the most beautiful and most controversial Pokemon TCG sets ever made, and we caught them all together. So today, we're ranking every master set. We're going to be using art, thematic integration, the collecting experience, and of course your feedback to see which of these amazing master sets truly defined the Scarlet and Violet era. So grab some penny sleeves and your favorite master set binder and let's dive in. Tell me in the comments below what set you would have ranked higher or lower. I certainly love that discourse. In total, there were 16 sets released during the Scarlet and Violet era, but we're going to count Blackbolt and White Flare as one set for the sake of this ranking. So something had to occupy the bottom spot, and coming in at number 15 is Obsidian Flames. This was the third set of the era, and it really, struggled to find its identity for a few reasons that we'll get into. First, let's score the cards and their art. There are absolutely some standout cards in this set. The 12 illustration rares are a nice, tight collection with the Gloom and the Ninetales in particular being standouts to me. However, the special illustration rares really drag this set down, I think. Other than the Charizard, there isn't really much to chase after here, so for that reason, we're ranking the art and the cards at a middle of the road 5. Not bad, not good. They just did what they had to do at a minimum to release a set. The best card in the set is the ETB promo, and you can't really pull that from packs, right? So I think that kind of tells the story. Next, let's discuss thematic integration. To fans, I think this set seemed a little bit like an afterthought, kind of a, oh, we need a Charizard set, so here's a Charizard set. It's big on bulk, as you can see here, and short on identity. So for the theme, we're going to be a little harsh and rank this set a 3. And next, let's talk about the collecting experience. Since pull rates were unchanged from the crazy generous pull rates that started the era at this time, and there are relatively fewer major cards to hit, weirdly, this set wasn't even that fun to rip. I don't place a lot of value on, value, but the fact that this is a Charizard set and is the cheapest master set of the era to complete says a lot, I think. It's still cool that the pull rates were so juiced, so opening a pack here and there is fun. You might hit something cool, but we're ranking the Obsidian Flames experience as a whole at a 6. So with a community modifier of 1, that's right, you guys also ranked it lowest, Obsidian Flames finishes in last place with a total score of 15. Coming in at number 14 is Stellar Crown, another small set and the 10th set of the era. Art-wise, this set absolutely has a few Scarlet and Violet era standouts. It's where we finally got the Bulbasaur and the Squirtle illustration rares to go along with the Obsidian Flames Charmander promo. But similar to Obsidian Flames, it's just such a small collection that the well just doesn't go very deep here. It gets a bump for that awesome, Bulbasaur and Squirtle to 6 in the art department, but they really are driving that bump. Thematically, this set absolutely has an identity though, even if the Pokemon Company, didn't give themselves enough room to stretch that identity here. Stellar Crown leans on the Indigo Disc DLC to showcase a bit of the stellar type Terra with Terapagos, although mechanically, I don't think it changed much. It's clear what the intention for the set was, but the execution just wasn't there. So for that reason, it gets a 6. The collecting experience this time around was a bit odd. Stellar Crown released right on that border of where the hype in the hobby was building, so it sort of missed the crazy bubble effect that hit with Surging Sparks, but singles were absolutely inflated for a bit upon release, more so than normal. It took, until January of 2025 after the release of both Surging Sparks and Prismatic Evolutions for the booster boxes of Stellar Crown to hit a market value of MSRP, for example, and took until the beginning of March for, the mass buyout to happen for this set. By this point in the era, pull rates had been significantly nerfed in the special illustration rare department to the tune of them being almost 3 times as difficult to pull as sets from earlier in the era. So that, coupled with the fact that there isn't any major chase that you'll be, overly excited to pull other than those, illustration rares, means I'm ranking this one again a 6 in the collection experience department. And with a community modifier of 3, you guys generally agree. I think that shows we're all, close in line together here, and Stellar Crown finishes with a total score of 21. At number 13, and I think this is no real surprise, is Scarlet and Violet base set. I don't think that's any, knock against this set. It's just base sets of an era are always on the lower end of desirability, while the era identity is established and more impressive sets released later on. This is a fantastic base set. It introduced quite a few changes from the Sword and Shield era, including bringing back EX cards, filling packs with 2 reverse hollows, making rares all hollow, and they were 1 per pack, absolutely juicing the pull rates for the top cards compared to Sword and Shield, and most importantly, leaning heavily into the new illustration rare and special illustration rare rarities that we all know and love so much at this point, kind of started here. Art-wise, the base set is really one of the unsung heroes of the era. There's a lot to love here with 24 illustration rares, 10 special illustration rares, and 6 gold cards. It really has it all. It's got connecting art cards like the Tarantula and Spidops, Gen 1 favorites like Slowpoke, and a drowsy, crazy artist representation like Akira Yagawa and Tomokazu Kamiya with the drowsy, plus a wonderful Gardevoir line set of cards that tell a great story together. It's an easy 7. Scarlet and Violet base set is an easy 7 in the art department. Unfortunately, just like any base set, identity here is sort of lacking. I don't know exact lead times, but you hear often that TCG sets are designed anywhere from 9 to 12 months before release, and this set released 4 months after the Scarlet and Violet games release, so there just wasn't a lot of time to establish and lean into a set identity for a new base set, I think. It has lots of Gen 9 Pokemon and some cool special illustration rares of the new legendaries, but otherwise it doesn't really follow any particular theme. So for that reason, it gets a middle-of-the-road 5 for theme. The collecting experience is a different story. Like I said, the Pokemon Company came out of the gate hard with pull rates for this era. Each booster box had 1 or 2 special illustration rares in it. Golds were easy to pull. I think they might have even been 1 per booster box? I'm not sure. Prices at the time were rock bottom, booster boxes at $90 each. Supply was everywhere, it was plentiful, and it was an exciting new era, right? It really isn't only nostalgia goggles coloring the score here, but the collecting experience for the set is going to get an 8.5. It doesn't get much better. With a community modifier of 2, Scarlet and Violet edges out Stellar Crown with 22.5 points. So here's our first shocker of the rankings. Coming in at number 12 is Prismatic Evolutions, this giant binder here. So wait for the scores and the reasoning before you click away. Prismatic Evolution is the first specialty set to hit this list. Specialty sets are different than the mainline sets of an era because they are not sold in booster box format. They have a set product lineup like booster bundles, some promo boxes, binder collections, that sort of thing. And they often contain reprints of playable cards in concentrated format to make it easier for players to get the cards they need. So acquiring huge amounts of packs at once isn't the easiest with specialty sets, and especially this set. It was, announced and billed basically as Evolving Skies 2.0. I don't know that there's ever been a more hyped set of Pokemon cards than Prismatic Evolutions. First, though, there is some good. Let's get that out of the way. You'd be crazy to argue that Prismatic Evolutions isn't chock full of just like wonderful, wonderful art with 32 special illustration rares. How many illustration rares does it have, you might ask? None. 0. Still, the special illustration rare category is really cool with subsets within subsets, really. You've got your Ogrepons with their distinctive art style. You've got your Paradox Pokemon with an awesome, varied, but really thematically linked style. And you've got, of course, the Evolutions, a special illustration rare for Eevee and every Evolution. The art in this set is varied, it's beautiful, and the only thing knocking this down from a perfect 10 to me is kind of how heavy-handed the art direction is in the set. You can tell what the assignment was for the artists, and there's limited room for the artists to stretch their legs with their cards here, but it does work very well in creating a beautiful, cohesive set of cards. Prismatic Evolutions gets a 9 in the art department. Same type of story for thematic integration. This set knows what it is. It's a celebration set full of playables and super expensive, beautiful special illustration rares. It's the evolution set everybody and then absolutely nobody wanted. That's really all the theme it needs, and it gets a score of 8. Now here's where things go downhill. The collector experience for this set was absolutely atrocious. The pull rates were so bad and the lack of illustration rares so apparent when ripping packs that it just isn't fun to open. Pokemon absolutely knocked it out of the park with the Japanese version of this set, Terastal Festival. There was a guaranteed special art rare in every box. It was a true, high-class celebration set. In English, however, it was an absolute nightmare. This set started an unfortunate trend that even still continues in the hobby, which is that if you're lucky enough to find packs at MSRP, you'd almost be dumb to open them. It just doesn't make financial sense to buy Prismatic Evolutions, rip Prismatic Evolutions, or even really like collect Prismatic Evolutions. It's just not fun. The pull rates, while unchanged from similar sets in the era, from era-specific sets, that'll fool you. It's not. It doesn't tell the whole story. There are awesome cards in this set. You're just not likely to pull them. It gets a 2 in the collection experience department. You guys seem to agree, so with a whopping community modifier of 4, Prismatic Evolutions has a total score of 23. Pokemon, unfortunately, really missed the mark with this release. At number 11, we've got Twilight Masquerade. I'm actually shocked that this showed up so low, but I think it's one of those sets that not too many people obsess over, but they also don't hate. So it fell in the rankings a little bit. It's a great set. It's sort of dead center of the era where it really hits its stride. The era really hit its stride. So with 21 illustration rares and 11 special illustration rares, it's a nice size master set to complete. The art, I think, is a real highlight. So like Scarlet and Violet base, it sort of has it all. It's got cards that tell a story together, like the Poltergeist and the Sinistra. It's got connected art cards, like the Growlithe and the Perrin. It's got thematically linked cards, like the Stained Glass Ogrepons, and a few great Kanto illustration rares with Pinsir and Eevee and Chansey. And different than the sets we've looked at so far, except Prismatic, this set finally has like a true chase card in the Greninja. I'm scoring this like an easy 8 in the art department. Thematically, like I said, this portion of the Scarlet and Violet era finally had all of the DLC to draw on and enough flexibility to really stretch the themes of the TCG sets. Twilight Masquerade is obviously structured around the Kitakami region and the Teal Mask DLC, and it puts out that vibe extremely well. The festival SIRs like the Kirin and the Carmine, the Blood Moon Ursaluna, the Applin and the Diplin, the Timber, just a lot of wonderful integration with the games in this set. So it's another easy 8 for thematic integration. Since Twilight Masquerade released in, the normal times before everything in the hobby went nuts during Surging Sparks, the collecting experience for Twilight Masquerade also didn't really suffer. The pull rates at this point in the era had been nerfed, so they were a little rough as far as SIRs go, but the addition of A-Specs and the continued inclusion of illustration rares meant that 1 in every 4 or 5 packs you'd pull something, and if you were lucky, you might hit that amazing Greninja. In fact, the Greninja, if I remember correctly, is the first card of the Scarlet and Violet era that really blew up. It crossed like $300 in value shortly after its release. This was one of the first examples of where like my crazy purchasing cadence to complete these master sets paid off, because I purchased it for the master set before it spiked in value. And that was a trend that continued for a bit, where instead of prices for the absolute top chases dropping after release, they increased. And it wasn't a frustrating hunt though. Even if we had all gotten used to pull rates from earlier in the era being better, these were still good. It was a fun set to collect, and I'm giving that collection experience a 7. So with a community modifier of 5, that pushes Twilight Masquerade to a respectable score of 28. So just cracking the top 10, we've got Temporal Forces, the 7th set of the era that kind of shook things up competitively with the return of A-Spec cards and added some, cool pink holo for collectors to look forward to pulling in their packs. Art-wise, this is another nice set with a nice size set with 22 illustration rares and 10 special illustration rares. Temporal Forces, again, follows some of the staples of the era we've discussed before with some connected art cards like the Amazing Deerling and the Sawsbuck, plus the Minccino and Cinccino. Some great Kanto illustration rares with Arbok, Ghastly, and Lickitung, and an unbelievably focused and beautiful set of special illustration rares of some Paradox Pokemon. If this set had a singular high-impact chase card like the Greninja, I'd rank it, a point or so higher, but right now it sits at a comfortable 8 for a score in art. Thematically, this is just another great example of the era being a bit more mature when this released. So the set direction and the theme were nice and established by this point. We're focusing on Paradox legendaries this time, like really exploring the time motif from the game. And it does it well. For better or worse, these just aren't the most popular Pokemon, right? I love them, but I do recognize a lot of folks feel a sense of like, look how they massacred my boy with some of these. So it gets a 7.5 for theme integration. Again, this was the middle of the era, and Temporal Forces released right in between Paldean Fates and Twilight Masquerade. So it was smack dab in the middle of a very busy time of 3 sets in 5 months for the TCG. And I think due to that, it kind of gets overlooked a bit. But for all of the reasons we discussed for Twilight Masquerade, it was still a normal collecting experience and a really fun set to put together. It also gets a 7 for collecting experience. And with a community modifier of 6, it edges out Twilight Masquerade by a measly half point at 28.5 points. Coming in at number 9 is Shrouded Fable, the 9th set of the era and the 3rd specialty set. Shrouded Fable is the smallest set of the era and is almost card for card identical to its Japanese counterpart, Night Wanderer, which is actually why we built the master set both in English and Japanese this time around. I'll be honest, I'm actually surprised this set ranked above many of the sets that we've already discussed. Art-wise, it's full of fantastic art, but nothing like too crazy as far as evergreen chase Pokemon, right? There are 15 illustration rares and 5 special illustration rares here, and while we do get like another wonderful 3-card story set with the Duskull, Dusclops, and Dusknoir, and a couple great Kanto illustration rares with Horsey and Persian, the rest of the set focuses pretty heavily on theme and playability over art. Still, because of the tight collection, the scarcity of the product, and just great choice of illustrators, this set will get a 7 in the art department. I mean, any set with an awesome Houndoom and an Akira Gawa illustration rare deserves at least that. And while they technically don't count, this set has some amazing promo products with great illustration and special illustration rares like the Kingdra, the Greninja, and a Kingambit. So, those boosted a little bit. Thematic integration is where Shrouded Fable really shines. So it's another tie-in set to the games. This set focuses explicitly on the Loyal 3 Legendary Trio plus Pecharunt that shows up in the Kitakami DLC from the games. So Shrouded Fable is the middle set of sort of 3 game tie-in sets, essentially, with Twilight Masquerade, Shrouded Fable, and Stellar Crown finishing out the story. There are only a couple sets that I think nail the thematic integration more in the era, and this was a fun set to collect if you played the DLC. Collecting it felt like playing it. It gets a 9 for theme. And as far as the collection experience goes, this was another set that came smack dab in the middle of like right before everything went bad. The illustration collection boxes with the Kingdra and the Greninja and the Kingambit were definitely promo products that didn't sit on the shelves long. And you can absolutely see that like reflected in the price of those cards now. But I've got, fond memories of collecting this set. I visited my local Walmart the Thursday before release and found at least one of every product a day early. So it was a nice little fun opening and binder build video we got to do off of that, even if our pulls were pretty terrible. And speaking of pull rates, with this being a super small set, with playables being like the biggest chase cards, like Earthen Vessel, the gold, is still the most expensive card in the set. It wasn't the most like hit after hit set to open. I haven't really like nerfed a collection experience ranking for terrible pull rates except Prismatic, but this one will get a small point reduction just because it did seem like things were a tiny bit worse for this set. Although that could just be, community sentiment, and pull rates were probably about the same as Temporal Forces and Twilight Masquerade. I mean, it's tough for me to knock like a 1 out of 90 pack pull rate for special illustration rares as too bad, even if at the beginning of the era it was like 1 in every 32 packs, because this whole era came after Sword and Shield, where pulling an Alt Art VMAX could be 1 in every 500 packs, like in Chilling Reign. So in context, I don't think the pull rates were ever too bad for Scarlet and Violet, but I mention it because it's definitely part of the discourse with this set. So because of all of that, it gets a 6 in the collection experience ranking. With a community modifier of 8, getting up there now, Shrouded Fable finishes with a respectable 30 points. So this one was also surprising to me, but coming in at number 8 is Surging Sparks. This set actually built a tiny bit on Stellar Crown, mixing 2 Japanese sets and having a minor link to the Terrarium from the games, and finally giving the era its second, true chase card. So unfortunately, there was a bit of a shadow on the horizon with this set that we'll discuss, but one thing that has to be said about Surging Sparks is the art is absolutely incredible. I'm talking top tier, possibly best in the era type of stuff here. We've got 23 illustration rares and 11 special illustration rares that pound for pound are, one of the best collections of any set in the era. It really does have it all. It's got hilarious story cards like this Execute, like is Execute playing sports or is Execute the ball, whatever, linked cards like Feebas and Milotic, Latios and Latios, super clever repeating art cards like the Durant, and of course, as previously mentioned, a true honest-to-goodness chase card in the Pikachu Special Illustration Rare. It has ping-ponged in value a bit, the Pikachu has, but it's absolutely one of the staple chase cards of the era. And you'll know from our 2024 ranking video that it's one of my favorites of that year. I'm excited to rank the entire era to see where it ends up. The art on this set is an easy 9.5 for its variety of beautiful chase cards. Thematically, like I mentioned, the set is, ostensibly built a bit around the Blueberry Academy Terrarium from the DLC, which I mean, okay, that's a pretty blank canvas for them to operate thematically, but they did a great job with it. Really, this is just like a catch-all set with just some awesome cards. The real thematic integration from this set comes from this collision of the 2 Japanese sets it's based on, Super Electric Breaker and Paradise Dragona. Often mainline sets in English are a combination of 2 disparate Japanese sets, so the thematic unity in English of a set can get a little muddy. They did a great job though, cramming like a beach dragon set with an electric Pikachu set, and for their ability to bring a thematic unity to 2 very different set identities, I'm going to give this set a 7.5 in theme. So, okay, we had to talk about it eventually. The collecting experience here. I'm going to get a little flack here, I think, because my own personal experience may not have been the same as everyone else's. There was a shadow, like we've talked about, looming over this set. So by this time, everyone knew that Prismatic Evolutions was coming, just a few short months after this set. So hype was already building and people were coming to the TCG just in droves, whether they were excited for what was to come with the new cool Pikachu and Evolution cards, or they saw dollar signs or Pokemon Pocket, whatever. This was the first set where booster boxes were MSRP upon release. I know that sounds like a dream now, but like I said, before this release, you could actually pre-order booster boxes or even cases of Surging Sparks at around like $110, $120 per booster box. So by release day, that was up to around like $160. And by the following week, they were at $200. And they've even, they've climbed higher since. But I want to be fair by recognizing that this set was the beginning of sort of like the scalping portion of the era. It was frustrating to get. There was lots of annoying talks about like short prints and, hold all this for value and blah, blah, blah. But again, because I did not join the hobby at the time, and I was already a part of the hobby at the time, I got my stuff for normal price. So on release day, my card shop didn't use market price because most of them weren't at the time. So here in my area at least, at the largest shop we have, we all got our booster boxes for cheap. I think they were $120, maybe $130, which at the time was just, hey, give our card shop a little bit extra, it's cheaper than market price, you know, those crazy people online buying stuff. So now they did sell out really quick, but still, while it was the beginning of a bad time, it was still a wow, you know, things are crazy type of situation instead of stores are empty, scalping is rampant, everything's on fire, everything's terrible. So for that reason, I'm not going to punish Surging Sparks as a set too much. Plus, honestly, it was fun to rip because the cards were so good. So it gets a 6.5 for collecting experience. And with a community modifier of 7, Surging Sparks edges out Shrouded Fable by half a point with 30.5 points. So here's where the community modifier really starts to make a difference. I was actually surprised which sets you guys like so much. Dropping in at a respectable number 7 is, surprisingly, to me at least, Paradox Rift. I mean, maybe I shouldn't be surprised. It is a really great set. This was the 5th set of the era, and it introduced the ancient and future mechanics. Plus, it was like their first major attempt at tying directly into like the core theme of the games. The set is also just massive, with a crazy 34 illustration rares and 15 special illustration rares, plus lots of bulk. Art-wise, there is something here for everyone. And as always, you know, we've got our linked cards like the Plusle and Minun or the Gimmighoul and the Golden Go. Artist representation with Tomokazu Kamiya, a great first card for a bunch of Paradox Pokemon, some awesome underwater illustration rares, which you know I'm biased for. Just a lot to love here and a huge amount of it. So this set isn't like full of banger after banger like Surging Sparks art-wise, but flipping through the binder, it is a super fun experience, right? It gets an 8 for art because of those reasons. And thematically, similar to Temporal Forces, we're tying in not to any specific story element from the games, but really just like the main theme of the story. There's a little Area Zero, a little Ancient, a little Future, you know, so the link to the games is absolutely there, even if it isn't the most like in-depth thing. I really think of this set and Temporal Forces as, you know, two sides of the same coin, as far as tying into the Scarlet and Violet game's base story. So it gets the same score, you know, as Temporal Forces with a 7.5. So Paradox Rift was also the first set of the era where pull rates got nerfed a tiny bit from the absolute, you know, nutso pull rates of Scarlet Violet base Paldea evolved in 151. So instead of a special illustration rare in 1 in every 32 packs, it actually bumped up to about 1 in every 47 packs or so. And, you know, definitely still obtainable, and they popped up often enough that even now, none of them are like crazy stupid in dollar amount. So the sheer volume of cards to pull made opening booster boxes of this set like very enjoyable. And I've got fond memories of buying and ripping packs here, and, you know, back in the good old days where it made financial sense to rip packs. Also, you know, for what it's worth, this was the first set where I experimented and got brave enough to open Pokemon packs on the channel instead of just posting my master set video flip throughs, you know. So you can kind of see in the video I bought a case of booster boxes, which is nuts, and I'd love to get back to that point in the hobby. So I'm glad I started making videos like that. It's fun to look back. And due to the fond memories, the fact that it's a giant set, and only the slightly nerfed pull rates, Paradox Rift gets a collection experience score of 7. So with a community modifier of 10, that puts it at 32.5 points. So coming in at number 6 and just missing out on the top 5 is a more recent set, Journey Together. So we're getting down to the nitty-gritty now, and every set at this point is just great all around. Journey Together was the 13th set of the era, and it really, you know, started the trend after Prismatic Evolutions of the Pokemon Company leaning into nostalgia for their set releases instead of focusing on game integration. So Trainers Pokemon are back, and everyone loved it. You know, art-wise, this is a small set. It's only got 11 illustration rares and 6 special illustration rares. But like Shrouded Fable, you know, it's almost 1-for-1 the same as its Japanese counterpart set, Battle Partners. But even though the set is small, like nearly every card makes a pretty high impact. The illustration rares are incredible, mixing fan favorite Pokemon like Articuno, bringing in new artists, like my favorite new artist, Nakamura Ippon, with this wonderful Swinub, and even an underwater card with Wailord, you know, underwater. And of course, Trainers Pokemon with In's Reshiram, Lily's Rabombi, Iono's Kilowattrel, and Hop's Wooloo. The special illustration rares, while small in number, are huge in impact. Salamence is incredible, and the trainer SIRs all have their own charm and beautiful art. We were even lucky enough to pull the Lily's Clefairy ourselves. I wish there were more cards in the set, but you know, for what is present, Journey Together scores an 8 in art. I think wishing for more is always a good thing. Thematically, again, this set marked a departure for the mainline sets where there's no longer any attempted links to the games, really. In fact, the only trainer even in Scarlet and Violet featured here is Iono. So still, the set does have its own thematic link with the Return of Trainer cards, and that alone, you know, is enough to give it an 8 for theme. I don't think there's anything wrong with leaning into nostalgia, especially in a 30-year-old IP, and they use that to great effect here. So as far as the collecting experience goes, pull rates were actually overall the worst they had been in the era, and only a 16% chance of hitting anything in a particular pack. That's pretty rough. Booster boxes were over market as soon as release, and by this point shops had largely, you know, given up selling at MSRP. There were Discord groups monitoring online stock. Pokemon Center drops were crashing on everybody or kicking everybody as bots. There was product being bought out immediately. You know, things were rough for this release. And the only thing saving this set from a lower ranking is that it was small, and ripping whatever packs you could get your hands on at least netted you some decent Master Set progress. And honestly, another saving grace is that the set never suffered too much from inflated singles prices. There were already, you know, people were already tired by this point of the market. And while sealed product continued to be nuts, you know, the singles market corrected for that and really became the saving grace of collecting this set. That's a lot of negative to the collecting experience, but to be honest, there are positives to this set that weigh more than those negatives, I think. This is a relatively cheap master set to complete. It's a fantastic entry point into the hobby as far as ease of collecting and beautiful cards for your binder. And for that alone, it gets a respectable 6. With a community modifier of 11, you guys push this set up to a total score of 33. All right, we're finally into the top 5, and we are breaking that barrier with what has become a tradition for a Pokemon TCG era, the shiny specialty set Paldean Fates. So the 6th set released during the era, this set is a follow-up to Hidden Fates and Shining Fates. This set is massive, full of playable reprints, baby shinies of new and old Pokemon, and a few major chase cards, to put it lightly here. Art-wise, this is a tough one to judge, so let me explain. The main set is pretty small, and it really just focuses on playable reprints, right? The next section of the Master Set is huge, with 120 baby shiny Pokemon. There are only 3 illustration rares in the set, only 3 special illustration rare Pokemon, and 5 special illustration rare trainers. However, the playability impact of those special illustration rares, you know, and how special the Pokemon are, really have to give it a bump. I'd like to rank this set a 6 in the art department, just because there isn't much here even to rank. But I mean, look at the Gardevoir, look at the Charizard, and, you know, Bubble Mew, right? I've talked about this before, but this Bubble Mew leaked early, and seeing that card for the first time is one of those situations, you know, making me sound lame, where I remember where I was when I saw it. I just knew at that point that I had to have it. The fact that it sat around $70 or $80 for so long is just crazy. And it's not just this market that made it explode in price. It truly is one of, if not the most iconic cards of the era. And for that reason alone, this set gets a Bubble Mew boost to a 7 in the art department. Similarly to Journey Together, this set thematically knows exactly what it is. It's a playable reprint set with shiny Pokemon to hunt every which way. It doesn't need any more theme than that. The shiny sets at this point were a staple in the era, and I hope they continue with every era to come. So for theme, Paldean Fates gets a 7. The collecting experience was an absolute blast with this set. Pull rates aren't just not terrible, they're fantastic if you enjoy baby shinies. You're pulling something in nearly every other pack. So SARs had been slightly nerfed again to one in every 58 packs or so. But again, there are so few of them that if you got your hands on a bunch of packs, it wasn't crazy to imagine that you'd get that Charizard or that Mew. So personally, I pulled the Gardevoir, and I was really happy about that. There's a reason there's been a resurgence in interest in this set, and there's a reason it's still being reprinted years later. And you guys know I love a challenge. This is a big set. It's a fun set. It gets an 8 for the collection experience. And with a massive community modifier of 12, you guys loved it too. Paldean Fate scores a total of 34. So at this point, you guys probably know the few sets that are left to rank, right? So spots 3 and 4 were a tight race, coming down to just half a point of difference in total score. But coming in at number 4 is the massive, massive double set Blackbolt and White Flare. So technically, these are 2 single master sets, right? But they're just so thematically linked and were released on the same day, same time, you know, that we're considering them one master set. I don't think many people are collecting one over the other anyway, right? So Blackbolt and White Flare is a response from the Pokemon Company to what everyone said they wished 151 could have been. They said, oh, you want like an illustration rare of every Pokemon of the generation? Sure, here you go. You know, you want your Pokeballs and Master Balls? Sure, here you go. Between the 2 sets, there are an unbelievable 139 illustration rares, plus a few extra promos that basically count anyway, right? And 14 special illustration rares. So every Gen 5 Pokemon got special love. And for extra measure, they even introduced a new rarity, the Black and White rare, with some fantastic monochrome cards. So if you're the type who likes to complete Pokédex binders with illustration rares, these 2 sets, you know, made your life a whole lot easier, even if it wasn't, you know, or isn't kind to your wallet. There are absolutely standouts in this set, like the Shinji Kanda Seismitoad, the Akiragawa Volcarona, the absolutely ridiculous Zekrom and Reshiram special illustration rares. The sets are so large that, like, everyone got a turn. Any artist you may love should be represented here with few exceptions. The illustration rares, I think, particularly stand out, and a few of the illustration rares are exceptional as well. You know, one of the cheapest illustration rares for these 2 sets on TCG Player right now is the Stunfisk, and it just gives off like these wonderful like Ponyo or Studio Ghibli vibes. Like there really is something in here for everyone, and due to sheer volume, these sets were always going to rank high in the art department, right? And this is where I'm probably going to get into slightly like hot take category, but the depth of the art beyond like a dozen or so examples just isn't really there for me. I think due to sheer volume, so many of the cards just had to be like Pokemon illustrated dead center with basic background, and artists like pushing past the constraints of their commissioned assignment to really let their voice shine is what I love about Pokemon card art. And because everyone, you know, there wasn't much opportunity for that here. But because everyone will have an emotional connection, right, to their favorite cards in this set or their favorite Pokemon from the era, every card is going to be someone's favorite. And I think that's pretty cool. Because of the relatively few high impact, like truly jaw-dropping pieces of art, and the fact that everyone had to get their turn here, I think Blackbolt and White Flare deserves a respectable 8 in the art department. For thematic integration, I really don't think there's much discussion to have or any other possible score than what this set is going to get. Like, I'm not going to bury the lead here. The set is another one that knows exactly what it is. And not only that, it does that job to excess. It's almost like egregious how much this set leans into its own set identity. It's an easy 10 in theme, you know, easy 10. The collecting experience is unfortunately where this set falls a bit short, you know, to be frank. I know the set is still like fresh in everyone's mind, so I'm going to try to put it into context in a useful way. Like I mentioned, this set really felt like a response to community feedback on 151. There was a lot of, why didn't they do this with 151, you know? Why didn't they release the Pokeballs and Master Ball reverses in English? Why didn't every Kanto Pokemon get an illustration rare at least, you know? Why didn't they do this earlier with every gen? You know, well, with Blackbolt and White Flare, the Pokemon Company answered, and like to a pretty gluttonous degree, right? This is really a case of like, you asked for it. Collecting this set felt to me like I was Brucey in Matilda, if you remember that scene, like where he's just being forced to eat the entire chocolate cake in front of the entire school. And honestly, that would have been really cool. But when it was announced that this set was the end of the Scarlet and Violet era, which was pretty unexpected, I think. Understandably, the community expectation was that we were going to get an end of the era celebration set like Crown Zenith was to the Sword and Shield era. And to be fair, Blackbolt and White Flare, it is that. It's just not the most fun celebration. Crown Zenith had an absolute just glut of gallery cards, some great gold cards, of course, a few fun secret rares in the main set. Or one fun secret rare in the main set. It was excessive for its time, but in a fun way, because pull rates were boosted to an absolutely crazy level. In Crown Zenith, you hit something in like 1 of 2 packs on average. That's, like every other pack was a hit. And again, it made sense. It was a celebration set, the end of an era, like a truly fun pack opening experience. So much so that it's still being reprinted today, or at least sort of is occasionally. And, maybe it's not fair to compare Blackbolt and White Flare to Crown Zenith, but my point here is that the blueprint for a truly amazing end of era set where everyone in the community would love it, where literally everybody from players to collectors to investment people could be happy. That blueprint existed. Not only that, like we had the hindsight of realizing what might work even more with 151. So when this set was announced, and then ultimately revealed that pull rates were basically unchanged from the mainline set pull rates, it was kind of impossible to feel anything other than let down, in my opinion. Illustration rare pull rates were boosted from 1 in 12-ish packs to 1 in 6-ish packs, so those were doubled. That's great. And technically there are Pokeballs and the occasional Master Ball, but those feel like reverse holos. They don't feel like hits. And there are God packs, which is cool, even if the odds are impossible. So there are great things about this set, but realistically, when you open it, very few of those super cool good things are going to happen to you. You might see it on the internet, but it's not going to happen to you in all likelihood. Whereas Crown Zenith is the opposite. Like if you open enough packs, you're going to pull a gold. It's going to be fun. Every opening is more likely of Blackbolt and White Flare is more likely to leave you disappointed than satisfied. And that's because in large part to that opening experience, not how difficult product was to get. So if this set was as fun to rip as Crown Zenith and packs were still as difficult as they were to come by, people would still rip them because it would just be that much fun. And just like anything in today's market, there's, even market manipulation with Blackbolt and White Flare. The Solosis has been lovingly termed recently the Booger Mew, right, for being by the same artist as the Bubble Mew, and it went through a buyout, spiking its value. Same with the Seismitoad. A counterpoint to all of this is that at the end of the collecting experience, to be quite honest, you've got just an amazing binder to flip through, and you feel like you climbed a mountain. There are more, but because there are more reasons to be frustrated with the collecting experience of this set than there are to celebrate it, I'm ranking the collection experience a 6. And with a community modifier of 13, that pushes Blackbolt and White Flare to a final score of 37. Paldea Evolved is our number 3 set of the Scarlet and Violet era. Paldea Evolved was the second set of the era and the first true set where the focus was clear, beyond just the introductory base set. This set focused on the Paldean starters and the 4 legendaries from the base game, the 4, treasures of ruin, with an absolutely massive 36 illustration rares and 15 special illustration rares. Paldea Evolved is the largest single set in the era, if you count Blackbolt and White Flare separately. And correct me if I'm wrong, anybody out there, but I believe it's the second largest Pokemon TCG Master Set ever behind Fusion Strike. So different than the massive bulk of Fusion Strike, however, Paldea Evolved set the gold standard for what a secret rare section of a Master Set could be. It has everything we've talked about loving in previous sets and somehow does them well, or as well, or even better than those other sets. We've got cards that tell a story together like all of the starter trio sets. We've got master artist representation with a triptych of trippy illustration rares from Tomokazu Kamiya, or the deserved chase of the set with Shinji Konda's Magikarp, or staple masters with uncommon card choices in Sao Sao with the Bramblin, or a Kirigawa with a beautiful Chi Yu. It just goes on and on and on. This is a collection of illustration rares and special illustration rares that have no gaps, no misses, no bulk. They are all iconic in their own way, just elevated beyond simple illustration rares. They, you know, I hope it's easy to demonstrate when looking at these cards in comparison to some of the other sets we've talked about, but flipping through this binder and looking at these cards, there is just this sense of elevation above other sets. The only thing knocking the art score down for me is the lack of a true chase special illustration rare. The Magikarp likely would have supplanted any SIR as the chase of the set just because it is so iconic. But like a big major chase SIR from like, say, Gengar, who never really got a standalone chase in this era, would, I think, have set this set off a tiny bit more. So I'm going to give Paldea Evolved a 9.5 in the art department. I've touched on theme a little bit already, where sets like Paradox Rift and Temporal Forces lean into the story elements of the main game, and Twilight, Masquerade, Shrouded, Fable, Stellar Crown, they hit on the DLC, right? Paldea Evolved takes a bit of a different path to the theme of the Scarlet and Violet era. I think it executes it almost perfectly. Scarlet and Violet marked the first true like open world mainline Pokemon game, right? So it's still Pokemon, so there were rails, but exploration of the Paldea region is absolutely one of the best parts of a pretty controversial generation. Paldea Evolved puts across that sense of like expansive exploration almost perfectly. Collecting this set absolutely feels like just a wide open world of a Pokemon Master set. It feels like exploring the biomes and the cities of the Paldea region. The sense of wonder in the games is like well represented in this set. It's big, it's fun, it's wide open, it is significantly tied to Paldean Pokemon, and for that reason, Paldea Evolved gets a 9.5 for theme. And looping all the way back to the collecting experience for this set, we'll hit a lot of the same themes we talked about with Scarlet and Violet base set. Pull rates were unbelievable, especially coming directly off the Sword and Shield era. You know, 1 in 32 packs would get you a special illustration rare, meaning you average more than 1 per booster box. Gold cards were everywhere. It was an absolute blast to open booster boxes knowing 3 or 4 illustration rares were waiting for you, and there wouldn't be a single one you'd be disappointed in pulling, and you wouldn't pull many duplicates because there were so many. It's just like, and not just that, like booster boxes were $90 and they were everywhere. You know, promo product galore. Upon release, the chase card was actually the Iono, as at the time the Pokemon market in English was sort of heavily influenced by the Japanese market, where Iono was ultra popular. So as the era progressed, that kind of stopped happening, I think. Of course, usually the main chase cards are the same in English versus Japanese, but the waifu tax kind of stopped happening over the course of the era, right? As reprints caused the Iono to dip in value, like reprints of Iono because it's so playable, some of the amazing illustration rares crept past it in value, like the Magikarp or the Tyranitar or the Sleepy Raichu or the Mousehold. I mean, there's just so much to love here. There was a negative to the collecting experience though, and that was print lines, which is odd to talk about, but with like such a huge focus on illustration rares, it was really frustrating to pull a card you absolutely loved and see just like big giant square print lines all throughout. So that's why PSA 10s of some of these illustration rares go for crazy money, because of the print lines. So for that slight downside, the Paldea Evolved collection experience gets a 9.5, a clean sweep of almost perfection. And with a community modifier of 9, Paldea Evolved finishes with a score of 37.5. So coming in at number 2 and edging out number 3 by a pretty wide margin even this late in the game is Destined Rivals. I don't think that's to anyone's surprise what sets are left. the 14th and the penultimate set of the era. It's not just like recency bias that has this set so highly ranked. In Destined Rivals, the Pokemon Company doubled down on the nostalgia by taking the trainer Pokemon from Journey Together and crossing that with a modern Team Rocket set. So with 23 illustration rares and 11 special illustration rares, it expanded on the promise of Journey Together by beefing up the card count to a more normal amount for the era. And what a job they did. You know, in lieu of connected art cards or evolution lines that tell a story together, Destined Rivals leans heavily into Team Rocket and Trainer Pokemon illustration rares with some of the absolute best of the era. The 2 Misty cards are all-time greats, and they will absolutely stand the test of time. The Rocket illustration rares are super interesting because instead of leaning into like the villainous, intimidating nature of Team Rocket, right? Most of the cards actually show off Team Rocket like loving and appreciating their Pokemon, which I think is very unique and clever. For me personally, there's a lot to love with the underwater illustrations and another card from my favorite new artist, Nakamura Ipon. And that's not even mentioning like the amazing work by Akira Igawa with the special illustration rare Moltres, the callback to the Silver Tempest Lugia with its counterpart, this Ho-Oh, or the absolute mastery of either the Mewtwo or the Garchomp in the set. Every special illustration rare is special here, and this set is absolutely one of the definitive must-have sets of the Scarlet and Violet era. So for art, it gets a 9, only because not every single card is banger after banger after banger like some other sets. Theme, though, is where this set shines. I'm honestly sort of at a loss for words to expand on it because it's a modern Team Rocket set. I don't really know what else to say. It would have been cool for nostalgia purposes to lean a little heavier into the more classic Team Rocket TCG Pokemon, you know, maybe some more callbacks to the WotC sets. But other than that, I think it's fair to give this set a 9.5 in theme integration, up there with the best of them from the era. And the collecting experience ranking is going to be a bit weird because this set is obviously going through a crazy value spike right now, and booster boxes are priced stupidly, but there's a ton of promo product, lots of promo boxes, reprints coming every few weeks. Like again, like Journey Together, this set did not suffer from crazy market manipulation in the singles environment. Well, maybe until recently. So while the overall collecting environment isn't the best right now, there are opportunities to rip this set. They even put Destined Rivals packs in the Mega Evolution tins. Instead of 2 Mega Evolution packs, you get 1 Mega Evolution and 1 Destined Rivals. So the Pokemon Company is well aware of the demand for this set, and I think they had time to adjust by this point to really trying to just slam product out. So while it does disappear quick, and it is tough to get, it's still in the realm of possibility to collect this set. I walked into Target and found the Team Rocket tins just on the shelf on like a Sunday night or something, you know, days after a restock. And I know that's atypical, but I'm just saying it's possible. So the singles are always out there with some absolutely undervalued cards, by the way. Like the Murkrow is at $10 as of when I'm filming this. Crobat is right at $100 for a fantastic special illustration rare. Misty Psyduck is expensive, but not like unreasonable for such a desirable card at $68. That reminds me of what the Misty Starmie or whatever from, was it Astral Radiance, was for a long time before it started shooting up in value. So I think Misty Psyduck is, you know, not the worst card to pick up at that dollar amount at this time. So like, you know, those crazy prices that I'm saying have unfortunately become the new normal for the Pokemon TCG, and Destined Rivals did continue the unfortunate trend of like super tough SARs and pull rates. I mean, and an overall 16% pull rate. So it's one of those cases where it's still a fun set to rip, it's still a fun set to hunt and to buy as singles, just because of how great everything in this binder is. So for all of those reasons, and for how awesome the master set looks when complete, the Destined Rivals collecting experience gets a boost off of the rough times we're in to a healthy 8. And with a second best community modifier of 14, Destined Rivals earns a solid 40.5 points. So that leaves only one set left, and I'm sure it's little surprise to anybody what that set is. This is the defining set of the era, despite some other sets really trying to knock it off the pedestal. That is, of course, Scarlet and Violet 151. This is Pokemon TCG perfection. It is the fourth set of the era. There is honestly, an argument to be made that 151 is what got the ball rolling on this like crazy era of the Pokemon TCG, even if it took a while to build up moss, while it rolled towards Surging Sparks and Prismatic Evolution. The hype for this set was unbelievable. And it was like an unapologetic nostalgia set, just smack dab at the beginning of an era that really should have been celebrating a new generation of games, right? With 16 illustration rares and 7 special illustration rares, this set isn't one of the biggest of the era, but it just does not miss anywhere. Every single illustration rare is beautiful and iconic for the Pokemon represented. Every single special illustration rare is fun to pull and wonderful to own. Heck, even the full arts here are amazing. Again, this set is unapologetic about trying to scratch the Gen 1 nostalgia itch, and not only is that okay, it's amazing. I make like no apologies for this being a landmark set to me, and I don't think any of you do either, right? It really just fires on all cylinders. We get, connected story arc cards for all of the Gen 1 starters. We get iconic pieces of art for like middle evolution Pokemon who otherwise are a little underappreciated, like Poliwhirl and Dragonair. Just an absolutely beautiful pair of trainer SIRs with Erica and Giovanni, and some cool trivia, right? Like the return of Kadabra to the TCG after 20 years. Just anyone who collects Pokemon cards likely has a master set of this, at least started, if not finished. So I guarantee with no evidence whatsoever that this is the most master setted Pokemon card set since like the WotC era with Base and Fossil and Jungle. Except maybe like some McDonald's sets or whatever, right? And there's a good reason why. It's amazing. Even the promo cards are 100% iconic. There just isn't a bad piece of art in this set. So 151 gets just a perfect 10 in the art department. Based on how much I've gushed so far, I'm sure you know what's coming next in the theme score as well. So like Blackbolt and White Flare, this set absolutely knows what it is. It does it to perfection. It is a love letter to the first generation of Pokemon. It breaks tradition on how Pokemon cards are ordered. And the main set is sorted by Pokedex order because everyone knew that that's the right way to do this set. And for a brief time during the Scarlet and Violet era, we got to, flash back to our beginnings and truly work to like catch them all with the first gen of Pokemon we all know and love. 151 gets an obvious perfect 10 for thematic integration. It's the gold standard by which other things should be compared. So let's talk about the collecting experience for 151. This set was everywhere, which may seem weird if you joined the hobby recently, but there was no question it was printed into the ground. Everyone wanted it, and everyone had it if they wanted it. It was the absolute perfect mix of product availability and demand. Like literally, I don't think it could have been better. If you wanted product, you got product. It released in multiple waves, with multiple types of products, with enough to go around for everyone. Some of the prices were a little inflated, but it was okay, at least for a little while. I think if things ever calm down in the hobby, 151 is a set that we'll see reprints for even the next like 2 or 3 years. It will go down as one of the quintessential Pokemon sets and one of the most beloved sets to collect. The pull rates kept the same ratios as Scarlet and Violet Base and Paldea Evolved, meaning even though, there weren't booster boxes because it's a specialty set, you were ripping amazing cards left and right. 151 was the absolute perfect balance of fun to open, fun to keep sealed, fun to buy singles. Like no other set in the Scarlet and Violet era, maybe any era, gets it so perfect. The size of this set is just perfect, again, for beginners. Like seriously, the amount of people who entered the hobby just to master this set is unbelievable. I have to argue with people all the time about promo cards not belonging to master sets just because of this set, because people only collect this set and they want all of the promos in the back of their binder. I'm sure many of you are in that boat, that, you know, rejoining the hobby because of this set. And like I mentioned for Blackbolt and White Flare, the collector community for this set was left wanting more, but not at the expense of disliking this set as it existed, if that makes sense. So, like, did we all want Pokeballs and Master Balls? Absolutely. Did we wish every single Pokemon got an illustration rare or a special illustration rare? Yeah. Would Crown Zenith level pull rates have been welcome? You bet, you know, of course. But while all of those things were talked about, it never detracted one bit from the perfect little slice of collecting heaven that is Scarlet and Violet 151. My only nitpick here is that there should have been a Gengar special illustration rare. I don't know why we didn't get one, you know, other than Morty's conviction, or Morty's whatever. It's an easy 10 in the collecting experience department, and that means with the top community modifier score of 15, you guys ranked it top as well, Scarlet and Violet 151 finishes with a perfect score of 45 points. Seriously, you guys ranked this the top master set 23 times, and the next closest set had 10 votes. You ranked it the second best set 11 times, and only Destined Rivals beat it with 14 votes. You ranked it the third place set 13 times, the next closest being Paldea Evolved at 10 votes. So it beat every other set based on community score by a mile. I think at least on this one, you know, we are all aligned. Thank you all so much for watching. For more content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you like Master Set collecting, please consider joining the Master Set Club as a channel member for members-only videos. All of your support is more appreciated than I can say. I cannot wait to continue collecting with all of you. Now let's get back to master setting the next era of Pokemon.